This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role abroad, and I'm Eve Engler. Today we're going to discuss the Canadian government committing massive sums in public resources to assist the U.S. war machine as Donald Trump continues to raise annexing Canada, and Mark Carney promised to distance Canada from the U.S. military. The latest major development on this front is Canada planning to join Donald Trump's Golden Dome. To discuss this move to weaponize space and Canadian military ties with the US, we have a Canadian Foreign Policy Institute fellow and Basili School PhD candidate Tamara Lorincz. First of all, thanks for coming on Talking Foreign Policy. You published an op-ed in the Toronto Star and Hamilton Spectator a couple days ago, criticizing Carney's statement on the Golden Dome. Can you just sort of describe a bit this initiative and lay out your argument?
Sure. Thanks, Eve, for having me. So last week, President Trump and Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth announced that the United States is going to launch a new anti-ballistic missile shield called Golden Dome. This is something that the Trump administration planned to do, very early on. It was one of the first executive orders, but in January it was called Iron Dome. Now it's called Golden Dome, and it's an integrated multi-layer missile defense shield that includes ground-based, sea-based, air-based, and now space-based sensors and satellites to supposedly detect and destroy incoming missiles from quote-unquote adversaries. And it's a very expensive program. The Congressional Budget Office released a report a couple of months ago that said that this missile defense program will cost about anywhere from 175 billion up to even $1 trillion. So it's a very costly program. And in the announcement that President Trump made last week, he said that Canada was interested in participating. But Trump also said that this missile defense shield is going to be made in the United States to protect the US homeland, and that if Canada wants to participate in it, Canada needs to pay our fair share. Well, our Prime Minister said that there are already discussions taking place at the very highest levels between the Canadian government and the US government about Canada joining this missile defense program, and we need to have more details before we need to have a public discussion, a parliamentary discussion and debate before Canada takes any steps to participate in this. This really is a program to weaponize space. There's great risks to it in terms of costs and an arms race, a nuclear weapons exchange, and an all-out war. Also, there's climate and environmental impacts, to this program. So, we need to have a fulsome debate. But what we know about this program already, Canada should say no to joining it. 20 years ago, Canada said we shouldn't join the missile defense program then. And again, we should not be joining this program. It's a weapons program. It's weapons in space. We should say no.
Yeah, and when they talk about defense, this is about the U.S. attacking and then having defense of different sites where there could be some sort of response. The notion that the U.S. is in some sort of defensive posture militarily around the world, of course, is beyond comical. Now, so there's some specifics about the Golden Dome, which you've laid out, that are big question marks and obviously suggest, I think, that Canada shouldn't participate. But there's another side to this that's politically should be politically sensitive, which is that you have Mark Carney making all these comments about our security relationship with the U.S. is done, it's changed, fundamental break, and sort of this rhetoric during the election campaign, clearly believing that the public wanted to hear that he would, shift gears with regards to Donald Trump's USA. And so, how does this participating in the Golden Dome kind of fit with Carney saying the plan is to move away from these deep Canadian military ties with the U.S.?
Well, it doesn't. Makes us more integrated into the United States war machine. And there's no doubt that there are Canadian defense weapons manufacturers that are lobbying the Carney government to participate in the Golden Dome program. I mean, companies like MDA and many other Canadian companies want a piece of this pie. They also, because this is a massive weapons program. I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars that it's going to cost, and it's very much driven by the American weapons manufacturers as well. One of the things that I pointed to in my argument was the expertise of Professor Emeritus from MIT, Ted Postal. He did this extensive interview with Deep Dive. This is a channel that's led by a retired Colonel Daniel Davis, and he taught Ted Postal, who is an expert on nuclear engineering, an expert on missile defense. He's the one that said that it's really the weapons manufacturers that are driving this new Golden Dome program. It was something that was, started by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and it was called the SDI program, the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars program 40 years ago. And the weapons manufacturers were pushing for it then. It got shelved a little bit over the past 40 years because it can't work. It doesn't work. And that's something else that Dr. Postal said, is that there's no way for this missile defense program to work because it can be easily overwhelmed or negated by decoys. So it's just a boondoggle. It's another cash cow for the weapons manufacturers. And this is why the Canadian weapons manufacturers want to be part of this program, because they'll benefit from it too, but it won't benefit Canadians. This is not something that's going to improve our economy or improve the well-being of Canadians. What we should be working with the Americans on is building, for instance, high-speed rail across the continent to help Canadians and Americans move around. We should be building housing. We should be investing in healthcare and education. Americans don't even have universal healthcare, and Trump is saying that he's going to be investing in a program that's supposedly going to secure Americans. It's going to do the exact opposite. It's going to further impoverish the people in Canada and the United States, and it's just going to enrich the weapons manufacturers.
Yeah, militarism has always had a very important part is subsidies to corporations, some of it just to arms companies, and some of it to sort of subsidizing high-tech research. You mentioned MDA, that of course is a Canadian company, big in space, which has been receiving government money for decades and decades, huge amounts of government money, and that's why they've become a big player in different radar and space affairs. Now, in the context a bit about this sort of militarisms and arms industry, yesterday the speech from the throne, the King Charles III. This is supposed to be about Canada asserting its sovereignty vis-a-vis the U.S. So we would harken back to our British colonial roots to assert our sovereignty vis-a-vis Donald Trump. According to Mark Carney's plan, I guess. Now, in this speech, though, it was interesting. You highlighted to me in an email that there's explicit mentions of militarism. Can you talk a little bit about the militarism in the speech from the throne?
Yeah, so the speech of the throne that was read by the king yesterday. It's crazy in 2025 that Canada's head of state is still the king. laid out the 6 priorities for this new Carney-led Liberal government. And one of those priorities is investing in making Canada more secure and strong. And as part of that, Canada is going to be investing in rebuilding, rearming, and modernizing the Canadian armed forces. And as part of that, Canada will also be joining the European Rearm Program, and that's an $800 billion euro, massive program, massive militarism program to ramp up weapons production, increase the recruitment of soldiers, and it's so costly, and it's going to militarize the continent. Well, again, Canadian weapons manufacturers want a piece of this weapons program, and they are pushing the Carney government. They push the Carney government to join it. And now we see in our speech from the throne that Canada will be joining the European Rearm Program. And so Canadians should be very concerned that we are going to be investing more public funds into the Canadian Armed Forces for more weapons, for more soldiers, and that we are also going to be participating in a European militarization program. So we should be asking, what's the plan here? Why do we need so many more weapons and more soldiers? What's the plan that Canada, the US, and Europe really has? We need to think critically about that. And we all should think about the fact that Canada hasn't had a foreign policy review. What we should be investing in, instead of more weapons, is in diplomacy, is in arms control, not in more weapons production.
Yeah, and the front page of the Globe and Mail had was Monday or Tuesday, had that the plan for this upcoming NATO summit in a few weeks in The Hague is to push for a 5% of GDP on military spending, some sort of plan where it's going to be 3.5% kind of officially, and then another 1.5% in, like, I guess maybe like police or RCMP or Coast Guard could be considered part of that 1.5%. But basically, the point here is this whole 2%, which is already ridiculously high amount of social resources on the military. Now we're going to push that up to 3.5% as the aim, and who knows where down the road. Maybe some point we're going to move it up to 10%. Hey, at some point maybe it's going to be 99% with the militarists get their way. But
well, Eve, let me just say something about this with military spending. So yes, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and the Defense Minister, David McGuinty, both said that Canada will be increasing military spending. They said, up to 3 times more by 2030. This is extremely troubling. And in the 3-hour Senate hearing with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he said before the senators that Canada and other NATO allies, and he was very explicit in mentioning Canada, was going to commit to spending 5% of GDP on the military. And it's really important for Canadians to know that right now we are at 1.4%, and we're spending, $39 billion every year in the military. That's increased 100% in the past decade. If we go to 2%, that is $81 billion annually, just 2%, $81 billion. If we are going to be spending 5% on the military, we are looking at $200 billion annually or more on the military. And for what? For more weapons, for more soldiers, for more military bases, for war with Russia and Iran and China and North Korea. And so Canadians need to be extremely concerned about what the Carney government is doing. And more than that, we also need to be concerned that we don't have any anyone in Parliament, no one in the House of Commons or the Senate pushing back on this. So we don't have the kind of opposition and representation that we need for peace and disarmament in Ottawa right now.
Yeah, well, but on a more positive note, today we do have hundreds. I've seen some images rallying in response to some of this militarism, in response to Israeli weapons company Elbit participating, and hundreds of others. I think it's 10,000 official representatives or delegates at the CANSEC Arms Fair in Ottawa, which is the biggest annual arms fair. The defense minister gave a keynote this morning. Can you talk, I guess, a little bit about CANSEC and a little bit about the protests against it?
Yes. So today and tomorrow, the CADC, the Canadian Association of Defense and Securities Industry, is hosting North America's biggest arms fair called CANSEC. And every year, the peace movement has organized a protest. And so there's hundreds of people that are there, blocking the gates, trying to prevent participants from and the weapons manufacturers representatives from going into the conference this morning. They were able to block for a long time some of the entrances. There has been a mass arrest, and they're there in front of CANSEC, trying to send a message that Canada shouldn't be supporting this. We shouldn't be welcoming arms dealers that are producing weapons that are injuring and killing people in other countries. I mean, right now we've got weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, L3 Harris, RTX, Raytheon, and Elbit Systems, Palantir, a whole bunch of weapons manufacturers that produce drones and missiles that are being used against the people, the Palestinian people in Gaza, for this horrific genocide that we've seen over the past year and a half. They're sending all of these weapons to Ukraine to prolong a proxy war there, and sending all of these weapons as well to Taiwan. Arms transfers are at a record high. Military spending is at a record high, and this CANSEC Arms Fair is just fueling this military-industrial complex. And Canada is deeply complicit in this by hosting this conference and enabling these arms transfers that are used in these horrific wars where people are being injured and killed. And so, I'm so grateful right now that there are so many protesters that are out on the street and saying, not in our name. We are opposed to this. Canada should be hosting a green conference, a climate conference. How do we get to a just transition in a green economy? Not hosting a weapons fair.
Yeah, and while Canada and the NATO countries and some of other U.S. allies in Asia, military spending is going up. In fact, in most of Latin America and in Africa, military spending is stagnant or even declining. So these are choices. We have choices. There are countries that don't have militaries even. There are countries like our NAFTA ally, Mexico, that spends a whole lot less in actual dollars and in proportion of GDP on its military. Those are choices that the Canadian government, Canadian people can make. Thanks a lot for coming on Talking Foreign Policy to discuss the Golden Dome and militarism and resistance to Canadian militarism.
Eve, can I just say one thing in closing? That we've got a new administration in Ottawa right now. It's really incumbent on Canadians to put pressure on their new elected officials to represent peace, to call for disarmament, to call for an end to these wars and weapons manufacturing, and say that we want to put Canada on a new path of peace and disarmament and global cooperation, because the real crises that we're facing are catastrophic climate change and poverty, and more weapons is not what we need. We need investments in people, peace, and the planet.
Well said. Thanks a lot for doing this, Tamara.
Thanks, Steve, for having me.